Hello, hello, hello out there in spray wash land. We're going to see what we can do tonight. Ray is actually in and on. As you can see, his computer's on. He's going and he's building something for us to have a little bit of a something to physically show. So we'll get on to that. But I'm going to start off with a little bit of a reminder of the huge convention, and then we'll get in and we'll talk a little bit about problems that you have with your systems and how to diagnose some of those systems, because that seems to be an issue that I keep getting and hearing. And so again, Ray is in the middle of building something. He's going to bring it in, and we'll be able to show you that here at the same time. But again, don't forget, we got the huge convention coming up, www.thehugeconvention.com. Get your tickets. Jason Ayers just got himself 5 tickets today, and he will be there. Not only will Jason Ayers be there, but I think he's going to end up being part of what we have for some of the pro members in one of the classes that we're going to do that are going to be specific to just pro members. And so we're working with Jason Ayers to help make that happen. And Jason's really become pretty good at building systems and building rigs. And so we're going to work on for you is building rigs. And we're going to do it from a beginner, intermediate, and expert level, professional level, if you would, on the building of how to build a rig, whether it's a enclosed system or a trailered system or whatever. So we're going to jointly work on that, the 3 of us. So between Ray, myself, and Jason Ayers. And I think that's the class that we're going to end up doing at the end of the huge convention for the pro members. So just keep that in mind, that that should come out. We should be able to release all this stuff very, very, very soon. But anyhow, and again, just for those of you that are just joining me, Ray is here. He's just not here. He's building something in the back shop that's going to help display what it is that we're going to talk about. So part of what I want to go over this evening is talking about diagnosing your systems and some of the problems that you have when you're trying to diagnose those systems. So one of the things that came up for me last week, I got a phone call with someone that was having trouble with their 12-volt system and trying to figure out why they couldn't get it to prime and why they couldn't get it to stay primed. And then another one happened the same week where it was just, they were having trouble with the sauce. Seemed like the sauce was weak, but they really weren't sure. And so how did we figure out what the problem was, and how did we diagnose it? So I'm going to go over a couple of those different processes. And even though this is starting off on the 12-volt side, I'm going to back up a little bit, and I want to cover the proportioner. Okay, so if you are, how many of you out there are actually going through the trouble of doing a drawdown test on your proportioning system? So that's something that I highly encourage, because when you're sitting there and you're setting your dials, right? You got your bleach and your soap and your water set. I'm not concerned with the soap dial hardly at all, okay? Though the soap dial is the one that seems to go bad before anything else. You would think that the bleach goes bad. In my area, in Louisiana, so my soap valve would be the first one I would have problems with. And then the water valve, because of the iron in the water, right? And it would build up inside the system. So surprisingly enough, my bleach was the last system to actually go bad. And so one of the things I highly encourage is doing a drawdown test. And I'm going to kind of cover that. So it depends on how you do things to determine whether or not there's a problem with your system, right? If you use drop tubes and you can just pull the drop tubes out, set them in some 5-gallon containers, hey, that's the easiest way to go. But a lot of guys, everything is hardwired in, or hard plumbed in, not hardwired. And so how do you do a drawdown test? Well, it actually is still fairly simple. Okay, so what you can do is you can take and first, the biggest thing you want to do is prime both your SH and your water. You want them fully primed. And then you want to let it sit for 3 to 5 minutes, right? And make sure you haven't lost prime at all, okay? If you have lost prime, well, then there's another issue, and we're going to cover that. But if you haven't lost prime, or you haven't had a little bit of a drop in your pressure, and I'll explain some of that here in a bit, you got to figure out, okay, great, I haven't lost any pressure, I haven't lost any prime. Now you look at your tanks, and let's say you have the exact same size tanks. Your supply or your buffer tank is the same as your bleach tank. That makes it the easiest, right? Then you can just take a piece of tape or take a pencil and make a mark, and then you can start your drawdown test, right? If you have two different size tanks, that's where you got to do a little bit of calculations, okay? So if you set your dials at a 50-50 mix, and you have both of your tanks are 50-gallon tanks and they're both full, well, they should be drawing down at the same level, okay? And this is one of them things where when you, if your bleach tank is near empty and you can fill it with water, that's kind of the better way to go, right? Because then you don't want to have to waste a whole bunch of bleach, but you can do it without, but I encourage you to do it with water on both. And if you could pull that drop tube out, it makes it a little bit easier. Hey, what'd you get? Did you make something good? Perfect. All right, now when you do that drawdown test, if you have two different size tanks, you got to do a little bit of calculations, right? If you're drawing on the water side and you're drawing on the bleach side at 50-50, and this is a 50-gallon tank, and this is a 100-gallon tank, well, that would still be an easy thing to do. So what you could do is you could set your water level on your, if you have dials and you have a way to mark that out, you can fill your bleach tank to say 25 gallons and fill your water tank to 25 gallons, even though they're going to show different levels because they're different sizes or different types of tanks. You can now start your drawdown and let them get to that same level and see if it's drawing at 50-50. Now, once you've determined that 50-50 is working good, I encourage you to do it again, but do it at a 1% or a 2%, 10%, however you want to look at it, mix ratio, and then be able to watch those levels drop. So I just encourage you to do a drawdown test every now and then on your proportioner, and that'll help you determine whether or not it's still drawing correctly, whether or not you got some debris in there. It can also help you with some air leaks, and I think that's part of what Raymond's got there. Don't you know what that is?
Well, it is, but I want to go back and I apologize for being late. We actually, Tanya and I were in an interview, and we're just it's insanity.
You're interviewing for a new position?
What's that?
You're interviewing for a new position?
Yes, 2. Actually 4. Mine too. So really that would be 5 and 6. Crystal Clean is really just amazing. Their expansion in Tallahassee is going to be just one for the record book. I love it.
That's awesome.
One of the things, and I apologize if I missed, on there. And I mean, you were part of the original, group of the proportioner folks. And I know that the proportioner term gets tossed around a lot lately by a lot of people out there on the internet. And, there's only one proportioner, and it's made by, Power Wash Store, and was developed by Tim Aselton, who is still working on getting the patent on there. And I mean, there are a lot of knockoffs, and this isn't to sit here and bash the knockoffs and say, oh no, bad, horrible, you're an awful person if you have one, because I get it. There's been a lot of mistruth and misinformation, shared about it. Part of the thing that really bothers me about this industry is that, there's so many people that don't even understand. I mean, there's businesses that are based around selling knockoff proportioners, and they don't even know where the proportioner came from or who invented it, or that it literally changed the industry
Yep.
5 years ago. And it really did. I mean, and if we want to look at the explosion of,
I think it's almost 6 years now, huh?
6, yeah.
Is it 5?
I'm going to raise my chair up. I feel like I'm shorter than you. And
yeah, you are. I could lower my chair if you'd like.
well, oh shoot, wrong one. Okay, there we go. And also, the problem is I got a new camera.
My dog is getting ready to bark because she wants to go outside.
I got a new camera too, and it's no longer like staring at my computer, so it's really messing me up here. But yeah, I mean, people, there's literally been whole businesses that are based on selling knockoff proportioners that nobody even knows where the proportioner really came from. They don't know who Tim is. They don't know the struggles of the design and all that. They just saw where somebody was posting schematics on it and said, oh, this is a great idea that I can make, using these knockoff, Pentair valves and blah, blah, blah. Again, this isn't to sit here and disparage those guys, but like I noticed somebody recently, and he's got a forum. It's a fairly new forum, a couple of thousand people in there, and he's building knockoff proportioners out of his garage. He has a soap that he's developed and is now, talking about the amazing thing that he's done, because he's paired the proportioner with a Comet gas pump and is putting a 12-volt clicker on there to go from water to your proportioning device. And there's so many new guys out in his group. They're going, oh my God, this is the best thing in the world. Oh my gosh, you're the new Jesus of soft washing. I had one of those built by the Power Wash store 4 years ago. Literally 4 years ago, I had that exact same setup. The Comet, mine was the Udor pump. The Udor pump with a 12-volt click, go from water to proportioner. And, we frankly pulled that off because it slung too much sauce out for roofs, and it slung too much sauce out for the average house. It was great for watering. It was great for keeping everything like wet down, but frankly, a little bit too much sauce for application, unless you were on a big commercial building. I found that the technicians would tend to over apply. And during that period, we had more landscape issues than we had at any other period of our company. So we went and took those Udors and used them exclusively for large commercial properties and big commercial roofs and apartment buildings where I didn't have the landscape to worry about, and I really needed to sling sauce out.
You know what I think? I think if Tim were to get $1 from each of us for every $1,000 that we made using the proportioners, that he came up with, he developed it, he invented it, he brought it to market. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And all of them that you see out there, all the knockoffs, are because of him. He would be, just in revenue from that, he'd probably make $1 million a year. Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's crazy, and that is, again, like you said, that's one of those things that looking back in this industry, and people want to say, oh, look at the problem, the explosion of the work and the explosion of the growth, in here. It's really not the Facebook forums necessarily. If you want to blame someone, blame Tim Hazelton for it. Yeah, it's his fault. Because he took soft washing and made it to where the average moron could do it. And I'm not trying to be insulting about that, but he literally made it to where the average guy, anybody could go, dial it in. And turn it down. There was no more, there was no more, making a mix. It also made it where, because my guys were now going from getting 3 houses done a day to 4 and 5 houses done a day with no loss in quality, because we weren't waiting on a mix to get made. You're not waiting on water. You're not, right. Your mix isn't being degraded because of the water that's in the tank when you mix the two of them together. So just for fun, and a lot of people may not know this, but Tim Hazelton has been at this for quite some time. Yep. And to prove and justify his being at this for a long time, Ray, what is his domain name? Softwashing.com. He actually, if he hadn't been one of the originals for soft washing, the only person that's going to have that domain is one of the first. Well, I think, do you remember it? It was one of the old forums that we were on, and Tim used to lurk it. And it might have been the RCIA or something like that. And so, they're talking about how soft washing is getting more and more popular, and we needed a subdomain for soft washing. And I remember Tim piping up going, soft washing, what is that?
and he had a signature file of, Tim Hazelton soft wash, www.softwash.com. And then it was like, I nominate Tim Hazelton to be the moderator of the Soft Wash Forum.
Yeah. He's obviously.
But so not sitting here again, not trying to bash the guys that do the knockoffs. Right. Again. A lot of them are just, a lot of it isn't evil. You've got. A lot of it isn't evil or bad intention things. A lot of it is just absolute ignorance, not knowing where it came from, not knowing that, it's still a patent pending device. The patent is still, awaiting, final judgment on there. And it's not just for the George Fisher valves. And, whenever you start talking about the people online about it, it's amazing how many people apparently are classically trained as patent attorneys on Facebook. And apparently they just pose as washers.
We have a lot of patent attorneys here.
There's a ton of patent attorneys in these groups. I mean, it's really shocking whenever you think about it.
It's kind of like we were saying last week, or on Monday, a lot of people have no idea what Memorial Day actually stands for. Mm-hmm. They have no idea the meaning behind Memorial Day, and it frustrates us, I think, to no end. And, this is one of them same things where, obviously not the same, totally a different thing altogether, yeah. But people have no idea where it came from, where it started. And, the only people that I think do know is they start their own, proportioner knockoffs, and they get served with that cease and desist.
Right.
That's,
and I think, he's even quit doing that, but God knows if that patent ever hits that it's going to be, anybody that's ever gotten a patent before, unless it's a lengthy process. It's a long process.
Costly process. All right. So what do you got to show us, Ray?
Well, one of actually, hold on one second. I'm looking for on YouTube for a lot of people that have never installed their own proportioner. And, it's funny because I know you have gotten a lot of questions on it. I got questions all the time because of my position of being one of the first guys with a proportioner on my rig. So I would get just questions constantly. Hey, there's a problem with the proportioner. Okay, you have an air leak. No, I don't. Yeah, you do. You have an air leak. It's almost guaranteed that the problems on the proportioner winds up being an air leak, problem on there 9 times out of 10.
That's kind of where I was getting ready to go a little bit earlier. So, like as an example, this week or last week I worked on one. And the thing was, I was called there. It was, hey, it just seems like the sauce isn't very strong. And the problem is the company is using, several trucks. Everybody's spraying the same bleach coming out of the same barrels. And yet they're like, all these trucks, everything is fine. But this one particular truck, the roofs just aren't coming clean. And so they're thinking, okay, there's a problem with the proportioner. And so this is where we went through the process of, okay, let's start with a drawdown test. So at a 50-50 drawdown test, guess what? The bleach wasn't drawing down as fast as the water was. So we knew that there was a problem there. Well, one of the ways that you can do that is you turn the bleach off, turn the water on, fully primed, right? You let it sit for about 4 or 5 minutes, squeeze the trigger. Does it stay primed? Okay. Mm-hmm. If it stays primed, there's no problem there. Now, prime the bleach, turn the water off, right?
Right.
After it's fully primed, wait for 4 or 5 minutes, squeeze the trigger. Is it primed? Okay. In this case, it was able to fully prime on water, but it wasn't able to fully prime on bleach. And once it was primed, you let it sit for 4 minutes. You probably didn't have to wait 4 minutes, but the point is that you let it sit long enough for that air to seep in. And then you realize, hey, there's a problem here. So you squeeze the trigger. I'll make my noises here. You squeeze the trigger like with a 12-volt pump, and you got this, hey, it's fully primed, right? But if you're squeezing that trigger and it's, okay, you got an air leak in that system. Okay, now that's on a 12-volt. Same thing on a booster pump, though. If you've got an air leak, a booster is not going to pump air. So if you have other stuff coming in, it may still flow, like if you've got the water and it's fully primed, but you're going to notice a good drop off in how it actually sprays.
Absolutely. I put a YouTube link down there at the bottom on there, and that was the original. I mean, Tim and I made this video of the first ever proportioner install when we were installing it onto the truck. And then there's another one here. I started posting it in the comments, but only YouTube users are going to be able to see that. So if you want to look at that, I don't know if you can copy those, but on our Spray Wash Academy YouTube channel. And then here's one where we took one of the skids, a soft wash system skid, snatched off the old Gen 2 or Gen 3 system, snatched off the guts on it, put a booster pump and a proportioner on there, and did the plumbing ourselves, on that. It's amazing, and I'm friends with the guys at the power wash stores, and I know that very rarely does a proportioner ever come back, a new proportioner ever come back with problems on there. It's usually an air leak where somebody has installed it and they just don't have it tightened up well enough. Or a huge culprit is on these barb fittings right here. So this whole new camera thing has got me really, really whacked out because I'm used to sticking it up here, and now I got to go right here. If I've seen people reuse these fittings and cut these things with a knife, and it'll cut just enough in there, a little bit of a notch into these barbs,
even on brass.
And no brass, but also even if you cut your things off with a knife. Paul did a great video the other day of heating your hoses up before you pulling it off, and you don't have to cut them off that way, because if you pull this thing off with a if you cut it off with a knife and then you try to reuse it, a lot of times there will be a small little air gap in one of those barbs, and just a tiny little air gap can have a problem.
I actually recommend cutting the hoses off and not reusing them. So for me,
I like to just put new barbs on mine every time we ever replumb one. We're just snatching these off and replacing them.
Yeah, typically we'll leave the barbs in place, but what we do is we cut the hose at the end of the barb, and then we heat the hose up, pull it off so that we don't have to use a knife and score it at all. And when I build a system, I typically leave enough hose left over to be able to, run that back on there. Because for me, I don't want to reuse the end of that hose because it's now been stretched, it's already been squished,
and it's deformed. It's truly deformed between heating it up the first time to get it on there and then putting a clamp on it. I mean, you've truly deformed that hose at that point. So
100%. So this one says I'm having an issue with my soap losing prime, and I have an air sound coming from the proportioner valve. I can tell you that most of the times that's truly not an air sound, but I mean, I wish I could make the sound for you. I know what that sound is. And I would suggest that maybe your soap is too thick and you might need to thin out your soap a little bit. And like I said in the very start of this, for me in my area, my soap valve would go bad first, because the soap just seems to stick in there and cling in there and work its way in and through the valve. And I would actually, when you take the thing apart, you can see where, because I use Apple Wash, you can see where Apple Wash has seeped through the actual valve itself.
And let me tell you something else too, Doug. There's another problem. There's another issue on the soap valves. And this is why all of the new systems you buy come with those master check valves, those big stainless steel master check valves. Because if you ever open a proportioner up, the soap check valve is the first check valve that comes into contact with pressure. So typically speaking, that's the valve that if it's going to die from a pressure hammer. So you stop spraying on a booster, you stop spraying on a gas pump. Your 12 volts aren't causing a big of a problem. It puts a hammer right into that soap check valve. So a lot of times that middle soak check valve is the one that's going to get damaged first. Newsflash, as far as the guys using the gas roof pumps, that's one of the reasons that the master check valve was created, was because of there's just too much back pressure on those you know, they're the greatest tool in the world, and especially whenever you build a knockoff, when you're like, yay, I just saved myself $800, and then you realize it's the greatest thing in the world until it stops working, you know, and it usually stops working in the middle of a critical time. Mm-hmm. But that's why they have the master check valves now, because of that back pressure from those gas roof pumps on there.
Same thing with the hoses that used to pop. I mean, I used to pop hoses, you know, all the time. And you're like, man, why are these things? Why is there so much back pressure on there? Yeah. And then the master check valves, I mean, obviously that solved all of those problems. Just put
the master check valve solves a lot. And I mean, the master check valves aren't using little things like that. I mean, that's $150, $200, you know, stainless steel check valve in its own right.
Right, and it lasts a long
time, you know. But again, you know, I pulled mine out. I think I did a video on it a while back, you know, and it wasn't checking anymore. Again, just like with the banjo ball valve that I did a video on, any of these ball valves that are coming in contact with bleach, you're going to get your sodium and your calcium dropout on that, and you get a coating on the inside of all of these areas, and it'll stop. I mean, that's, you know, one of the, I did a video a couple weeks ago with, you know, are you leaching over in your rinse water? Okay, and I pulled apart a banjo 3-way valve, and you can just see a scale the whole way around it. And the whole fitting is just scaly and white and crusty on there, and that stuff starts flaking off, and you're not getting a full seal where your ball valve is coming from.
And that was something that I talked about a little bit earlier while you were out building that thing, and this is where a drawdown test can help you out too. And when you look at it, again, for me in my area, my soap valve would always go bad first, and then my water valve would go bad, and then the bleach would always be last. To go bad, or not to go bad per se, but to have an issue. And the reason is you get that buildup of stuff from so depending on what you have in the water, if you've got iron in there, or, you know, all the different things that you have in your water, those start building up inside those valves over time, and they need to be cleaned out or flushed out. And again, doing a drawdown test can help you determine how the insides of that are actually doing.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I just went back to the workbench and grabbed while you were doing is an independent check valve. And through the years, I've done videos in Pro on this, even in Spray Wash Academy. But if you ever have a valve that you know is not checking, is that it's, you know that you're having a problem with the check valve. And especially if you have an original proportioner that's encased in the beautiful stainless steel, you know, the shiny, as John McIntyre says, the GD shiny box. One of the things that we always do is go and put a check valve in line. I'd had 90s on here. You could use, you know, straight ones on there. But one of the simplest fixes you'll ever have, whenever you start losing prime and thinking you have a leak, or you're not checking your air like you should, is so you could use a straight one like this, or you could use the elbow, the 90-degree elbow, but actually stick this in line somewhere between the bleach tank and the proportioner. Stick one in between the water and the proportioner, and stick one in between the soap and the proportioner. That way you can redo your check valves without actually having to open up the shiny box on there. Now, whenever your things after use, it starts cracking and you're getting actual air gaps in there, it's not going to solve that problem. And the bleach one will eventually, I mean, they use a special check valve on the bleach. It's not the same check valve as all the rest.
So if you look inside those check valves, So there's two different check valves. One of them is rated for the bleach. The other one's rated for water. And if you look down inside, if it's blue, that's for the water.
Yeah. And that the one they use with the bleach is that actually has the Hastelloy spring in it. So, Jeff, Brenda asked, how often do you flush a soap valve? Brenda, I never flush my valve. I never flush. I literally took every flush off of my proportioner. It was kind of a running joke. But because Tim said, all right, well, let's just see, how long this thing will work. But on that skid unit conversion that I did, I got 3 years before I ever had a problem on there. And that was without ever flushing I never flushed it. So.
Yeah, I would suggest, mostly on the soap valve. For me, I think it also depends on what types of soaps you're using and that sort of thing. But I think every 6 months, you're probably good to go. One of the things that you can do too, like let's say you feel like you're not getting any soap, right? Somebody had said in there earlier, they didn't feel like their soap was drawing and making the noise and all that. Okay, so one of the things that you can do, turn your water valve off, turn your bleach valve off, turn your soap valve all the way up, and just run it that way, right? All you're doing is you're just trying to flush whatever, because soaps create buildup inside there sometimes, depending on how thick you're running your soaps and the types of soaps. And so doing that and flushing some hot water through there every now and then, not hot, but warm water through there, like every 6 months or so can help clean that out, kind of a thing.
Jeff, I order any of the power wash doors. I know Nashville. I call Eddie and Dave up there in Nashville. I keep 12 of them in stock at all times. They can get them out to you tomorrow. That'll probably be him or Steve. Steve Hill might even be closer for you.
Steve's real close there.
Yeah, Jeff.
I mean, again, you order so many of them. I mean, I've got in our shop, we had 2 bags, one that were the bleach ones, one that were the water ones, and we order more of the water ones because they work on the soap and the water. Right.
And, also about the soap, you brought up something you can do on your soap tanks is just, fill it full of water and just blast it out, and your soap line should not be a 1/2-inch line like your other lines are. I mean, we typically are using a 1/4-inch line for our soap because I just don't need to introduce as much soap as I do bleach. But just fill your soap tank up with water and just, like you said, turn it on. And that's the only valve that's open on there, and just flush it out with water hardcore.
Yeah. I can tell you, I use 3/8 lines on our soap lines.
Yeah.
We tried the 1/4, seemed to have a little bit of an issue with those. So we went up to the 3/8. 1/2 inch is just too much, really.
Yeah,
I don't need that. And that seems to be, for me, it seemed to be the 3/8 was the best.
And Brenda's talking about the Terror pressure washer. That was literally, I was the test kitchen usually for most of the power wash store stuff that came out regarding the proportioner, because they always said if Ray's guys couldn't break it,
nobody could.
Then hey, it's solid. Ray's guys aren't screwing this up. It's good enough for market. So Michael Ovens is saying, could you add a valve on the product side for flushing? I know that the power wash store actually has, I'm getting like Napoleonic short man disease here because you're so much taller than me. There we go. All right. So on the
You're still short.
Well, I'm not Steve Hill short, but
there you go. Yeah. Nobody is Steve Hill short.
Whenever Steve goes up there to the corporate meetings in Milwaukee, just in case it snows, they have to put those poles on top of him, like they do on fire hydrants.
The red flag flying.
Yeah, in case he wanders into a soap bank. But Michael, I know the ones that are built from the power wash store actually have a separate check valve on there, and it's recommended you flush out your proportioner And at the end of the day, you turn your flush valve on and run it for 5 minutes, just water. So it's bypassing the bleach, it's bypassing the soap, and just introducing all water into your proportioner.
I don't think that has anything to do with the soap, though, does it? That three-way valve is just for the bleach. Yeah.
I thought it introduced it.
No, just for the bleach. Because it's on top of the bleach side, and it's a three-way valve to let positive water in or bleach in. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. I'm sitting here thinking about you're right. Bleach only, because that manifold is, all, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. You could introduce in a water valve, on top of that. You're going to have like a Franken valve type scenario at that point. So,
but you could, for Michael, you could put another valve in. The only thing about adding more valves every time, it just simply boils down to you're giving yourself another area for an air leak. But you certainly can do that, and it's a good alternative. And then you could do it more often if you wanted to.
Every valve you have, every connection you have, every splice you have, every clamp you have is a potential failure point.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Somebody said, what do you recommend to thin soap with? I use water. I'll typically, like on my house wash mix, I'll take a 50-gallon drum, and it's about 50% water, 25% apple wash, and 25% secret agent is my special blend that I use. I get plenty of color that way. I get plenty of suds that way. And I thin it down. I mean, most guys I know cut their original apple wash at least 2 to 1, if not 4 to 1. And because
I cut mine crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy how much you can cut it. It really is.
I literally, on mine, I would use a 15-gallon soap tank. And typically what we would do is we would draw down about 10 gallons, and so it would have 5 gallons left in it. We would put 1 gallon of apple wash, and then we would put a cup of slow-mo and then fill the rest of it up with water again. And that's what we sprayed with.
Yeah.
That's cutting it down. And look, so the only thing, on that is just using warm water when you mix it all together. You don't have to, but it breaks it down a little bit better. And, and then when it turns cold, it's all good to go. So,
right. Yep. But again, and that's, going back to some of the builds that we see out there. And I know we were just talking to someone else actually about, doing the rig building class. As you're an owner operator, and I see guys that are a blend here watching, and there's some of us that are owner operators, meaning, we're out there on our own rig. And then there's others of us that are running crews and not spraying ourselves. The more complex you have your machine, the more problems your crews are going to have. Mm-hmm. And building your rig might be your labor of love. So
all the fancy gadgets are great if you're on your own, but not so much when you're not.
Exactly. And your guys are not going to understand how to fix them. They're not going to understand, how to troubleshoot them. It's just going to be a problem for you. And ask me how I know. I know. I remember getting about a $12,000 rig a few years ago from Paul back whenever I finally really started making great money. And I was like, okay, at one point I had time, and then I had money. And it's like when I have more time than money, I build my own rigs. When I have more money than time, it's actually more valuable for me to buy a rig.
I was just talking with somebody else the other day where, when you get to a certain point in this business or any business, it no longer makes sense sometimes to build it. I love to build stuff myself. I love it. But sometimes you get to a point where, do I spend 20 grand on a rig, or do I build it myself for, let's say, 10? Okay. But that time in between, that's more than 10 grand a lot of times.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I went and bought one of those. I went and bought one, and it was absolutely beautiful and wonderful, and I loved it. And it was an amazing, amazing rig. And it had the 12 volt, control on there, remote. And like within the first week, the guys lost the remote control. It's like, how did you lose the freaking remote control to this, Yeah,
if you get a remote control system, order about 30 different remotes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because the old one that looked like the old 80s cell phone, that one worked really well. But the little hand and the little fob one, I mean, you really had to be right up on it to happen. And your guys, just your crews. Remember, they're crews kind of for a reason, and they're God bless them, and they're making you tons of money, and treat them like gold. But don't expect them to be able to grasp the same engineering that your mind has put into creating this system out there. I mean, it's KISS, keep it simple, stupid. And
you do get those good employees, from time to time, but the general average everyday employee is not going to put the care and concern that you're going to put in. They're not going to put the thought processes that you put into your systems, into your equipment, and to maintaining and keeping and valuing that equipment.
Yep. I have, I put that post up, the other day, and I shared it in a couple of groups, and it was, guys talking about the big box store, people starting out with their big box store pressure washers. Mm-hmm. The pressure washer you start out with won't be the one that you finish with, and if you look at
if it is, you did something wrong and you're probably already out of business.
Well, I don't want to make an elitist sound. Make this sound elitist, because there will be people that will be happy for washing themselves the rest of their lives. If that's your version of success, that's your story, then more power to you. But if you look at any type of scaled multi-truck type company, almost guaranteed that just how they don't use a Lowe's or a Home Depot Simpson pressure washer on there, the other thing they're going to have in common is their rigs aren't going to be overly complex. Mm-hmm. You're not going to have to sit there and say, okay, I want this valve for this and this valve for that, and turn this valve, and then I got to push this lever down, and then I got to go pop,
spin around 3 times.
Yeah, they've gotten it to the point to where their employees are okay. You take this valve or push this button, and bleach comes out, and then you adjust the amount right here, and then you push this knob and water comes out. And they really keep it that simple out there. It's a checklist for everything.
And I think that's where, even going so far with the proportioners, that is because some people say, well, I don't want my guys having proportioners. They're not simple. They're not, and I'm like, dude, that's just because you've never had one. You don't understand. I mean, I would so much rather my guys use a proportioner where all they have to do is go 1%, done. Okay. Yep. Then to have them messing with, okay, let me, I've got my bleach in there. Let me add my water in there. Let me add my soap in there. Hey, 1 + 1 equals, okay, that means I have a 7% mix, boss. Mm-hmm. How in the world
do I make a 7% mix?
So I don't have to worry about any of that. It's turn the dial. That's it. Right. Says 1%, says 2%, says whatever I want.
It really, and hell, on the inside label, it sits there and says, on the inside of the box, okay, oh wait, it's vinyl. I need to be at 0.5% to 1%. Mm-hmm. Oh wait, it's really dirty vinyl. I might need to be at 1 1/4 than that. Yeah, it is. Somebody just said it's they're not actually mixing. Brenda's right.
It's so much.
It is much safer. But for like I know a guy. I know a very large company, Rolling Suds, out of Pennsylvania, and this is a man that's a multi-million-dollar company per year, and he literally sprays house wash mix out of his cat pump pressure washers. They make a pre-mix before they leave the house. Everything gets sprayed at 1 or 1.5%. I don't think they do roofs, obviously, but that's how they roll. I mean, they keep it that simple for the guys. Oh, wait, it's not coming up. Hit it a second time. Oh, it's not coming up. Hit it a third time on there. But they really just keep it that simple. And he understands part of the cost of his doing business is rebuilding his cat pumps on his pressure washer once or twice a year.
Mm-hmm. And you think about those pumps and you think, oh, well, gee whiz, that's just stupid. That's a $1,000 pump. That's just stupid. Okay. Yeah, that $1,000 pump, it's the same thing I've said with the booster pumps on many occasions. Guys are like, do you rebuild your pumps? No, not usually. I throw them away and I get another one. Well, why do you do that? Well, because sure it cost me $1,000 for that pump, but that pump shot 200,000 through it. In his case, he's probably shot 500,000 through it.
Exactly.
It doesn't make sense to not do it that way for him.
I mean, he has an on-staff mechanic type scenario. I mean, it's his job is to rebuild pumps.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. All right. I wanted to touch on something else. Let me look at my notes here. I already kind of went over it a little bit, but again, just going back to the whole air thing and diagnosing your system a little bit and knowing whether or not it is a problem with the let's say it's your booster pump and it's not coming on, or it's tripping the breaker or whatever. You can take your hose end off, right, and take the fitting off of the end, and you can typically maybe even take a pen inside there and turn the impellers a little bit. Or you can try to turn, you can turn your fan motor. That's not really going to do you much good. But if it doesn't spin, or if it's hard to spin, that's the problem. Yeah. And it doesn't take much. What happens is it's so tight, and that little bit of debris is binding it up, and that's what's causing it.
Yeah, when those diffusers start to fall apart, I mean, they start to fall apart, and they die, and they get jammed up in there, and there's only so much work it can do. That motor's going to start tripping, and the boosters absolutely suck. But in my opinion, they suck less than other systems that are out there. Because
I think every system has its advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah.
And like on the boosters, you could actually take that sleeve off, clean everything up, put it back on. It may not work perfectly, but it's probably going to work until you get parts in, or until you get another booster, or it's kind of like a mini rebuild. Even though you might have parts that are like, oh, this is broke, and throw it away.
Breaking parts.
Put it back together and run.
I've run boosters missing stages in them before.
Oh, yeah.
Literally, like all that was in there was just the steel bowl on there. No impeller. No, the diffuser was in there. Now the impeller was in there, and the bowl was in there to keep the bowl from rattling around too much. But I mean, you don't have to have all the parts in there. You can. It's kind of crazy, but yeah.
Well, you realize that. I mean, especially if you take something apart, how do you know if you put it together correctly? If you have extra parts. That's the only. If you don't have extra parts, you put it together wrong.
We call this factory leave off.
Doesn't matter how many times you take it apart, you should have extra parts left over when you put it back together. It's just the way it is. It's the law of the universe, if you would. Mm-hmm. So,
but circling. I'm gonna do my Jen Psaki. Circling back around. Again, if you look at the scaled companies, if you look at the scaled companies and the people like you and I, who've now sold our businesses and can retire, not sold 2 old busted ass trucks and sold my business. What'd you get for it? $30,000. You didn't. You sold your equipment. We sold our businesses, and at retirement level, to at that point, that's where I go back to any of these guys that have scaled up have kept their equipment as simple as possible. So whether you're building or buying, it just needs to be simple out there so that anybody can pick it up and use it.
Yeah, and I would even dare say that, like, I mean, I was getting ready to say that, you know, Crystal Clean would have much rather you not have all that specialty equipment on than having the specialty, you know, than not. But you know, they're buying your book of business more so than
well, no, I mean, they use proportion. They use original proportioners as well too. I mean, they really. I mean, they're.
But I mean, they probably didn't want the clickers on them. They probably
not at all. No, I mean, if you look at all their stuff is manual
systems on them, they probably didn't, because they're systems that aren't necessarily needed. Number one, and number two, they're a potential for a problem that now has to be fixed out in the field. And a lot of the guys out in the field, they know how to spray water and bleach and soap, but they don't know how to fix them, you know?
Right. Yep, exactly. I know they have a full-time mechanic at their shop in Jacksonville.
I got a full-time mechanic.
Gary, yeah, I did. I used to also. Gary's saying repetitive issues, see your fittings that are tight at install become slightly loose over time. Easy fixes. Absolutely. Remember, these machines shake, they shimmy, they vibrate. They, you know, I mean, the reason that the pressure washer has rubber feet on the bottom of it is because literally that engine would shake itself apart or shake stuff apart on your truck if it didn't have those rubber biscuit feet on there.
And it's really important to understand on those rubber discs on the bottom of those pressure washers, there's two things you don't do. You don't make them really tight and you don't make them really loose. You get them snug. If you tighten it down too much, it has no vibration to it. It literally is impacting itself the whole time. And if you get it too loose, it's going way too far side to side.
It'll literally cut. It'll cut a bolt in half. I've seen them cut the bolt in half from that. You know, and you need lock nuts on the bottom of them too. Yeah. Another thing. Here's an interesting one.
Double nutting helps. Yeah. A lock nut is best, but you can also double nut them and lock those two nuts together if you don't have a lock nut.
So somebody, and I can't see the name of it, but heated a barrel on a booster to get it off. I have not, but from knowing how the boosters work, if it's not coming off, I mean, first off, always remember your boosters are reverse thread. So if you're going lefty loosey, you're actually tightening it up. So, you know, you screw it to the right to get it off because, hey, Wild West joined us. About time, you're late. So you're turning the barrel of your booster, you're screwing it to the right to take it off. But sometimes those little pieces on the impellers will break off on there, and it's an absolute booger to get them off. I mean, I've had them where I'm holding the booster like this. It's totally unscrewed. I can see all the threads. There's 2 or 3 stages visible, and I'm shaking it like this, and it won't come in. You know, that's a 40-pound thing, and it still won't come off.
And the problem is that so yes, I have heated it to get it off before. And one of the things that I would also suggest is to use a strap wrench versus a pipe wrench.
Yep.
And part of the reason is if you put the slightest crimp in that barrel, or you just slightly make that thing oblong in any way, shape, or form, it is not going to operate. It's just
if you deform it,
everything is so tight. The tolerances are so tight. It has to have complete, easy movement. So you don't want any marring or any scoring or any indentations. You can't have anything like that on it. So
if you heat it out of round, you got a problem.
Typically, if I had to heat it up, it just meant that it needed to go bye-bye.
I had an interesting one the other day. Excuse me, I'm still getting over this cold. I got it all. I was testing it out, and water started shooting out of the side of the pump in a hole that I never realized was there before. Those little groove holes on the side of where the plate ties into the motor. So it's actually the seal, that main bearing seal, as it goes into the shaft, into the electric motor, had shot out. And after probably 30 Gould's boosters in my life, I've never had one that had the main shaft seal die on me before.
Yeah.
That was
I
all
did
new.
kind of way back when, but it was because I ran it dry, and that was the issue that was the reason that caused that. But hey, to go back and address this one, Eric at the power wash store in PA could not get the barrel to loosen. Look, there's going to be times where they're freaking not coming off, period. I mean, in order to get it off, you have to damage the barrel. And at that point, I mean, I'm sure Eric said, hey, it's just time to replace this thing, because that happens. They're not always going to come off, and they're not always going to come off smoothly. Matter of fact,
question about CRM.
And also one other thing, Ray, just to touch on it. Some of the boosters come off counterclockwise. Some of them come off clockwise.
That's the Gould's. That's the Gould's that I'm speaking of. That's the reverse.
Right.
It comes off clockwise. Yeah. The CRM I used Housecall Pro.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go ahead.
Good after you.
Now we had tried. What was the one I tried, Ray? I can't remember. I tried a couple. Customer
one that looks like the old 80s video game.
Customer Factors, the one that I tried.
That's it.
But in the end, we ended up, we were using just QuickBooks, and we were using a different software for our scheduling. Yeah. Can't think of what it is right now. But yeah, we really just used QuickBooks. We didn't really use a full CRM. Should have. We would have done a lot better. But to be honest with you, at the time, we were so busy and always stayed busy. I should have followed up with some people even more that I didn't. And so I do recommend a good CRM. There's not one that I'm going to specifically recommend, though. You know,
I was real, hey, Rich, what's happening, buddy? I can't speak highly enough about Housecall Pro, especially after now in this transition phase using another one. I got Housecall Pro really spoiled me. Whatever CRM you do, first off, understand that whatever CRM that you make sure, test out a bunch of them. I mean, test out Jobber, test out just every Housecall Pro, Service Factor, Service Monster. Try them out, because whatever that you wind up sticking with, whatever you wind up using that you like, and ask around, and don't take just my word that Housecall Pro is the shiznit. Understand you're going to have a commitment to that, where am I going now? CRM for the rest of your natural business life. It's not something you want to bounce around on. It's not something you want to go in there and say, hey, I think I'm going to try this. And whenever you go to sell your business, it is so absolutely, critical to data is so valuable. I mean, this is whenever you can sit there and prove to someone that I did such and such. I mean, and that I did this and I did that. It's just, I'm going to share my screen here, whenever you can go in there and say, so I want to see, share screen.
And that's really one of the reasons why I didn't go back to a different CRM. I had tried a couple, and then when I went to Customer Factor, I spent a lot of time, money, and effort. I had a lot of stuff in there, and when I realized it just wasn't working for me, I'm not saying it's a bad system at all. I think it's actually a very robust system, and I just felt like it was too robust for me. And so when you go and you put all this time, money, and effort into it, if you want to switch to another CRM, it's not that easy. And so it takes a lot of time, money, and effort to transfer and transmit and get everything over and get everything set up. And so that's why when I needed to do it, when I realized, hey, I got to do this now, I switched over to, we already had everything in QuickBooks anyhow. So we basically just dropped that other side of the CRM, just stuck with the QuickBooks for that period of time, knowing that eventually we would switch to something else. But it just never ended up happening.
Absolutely. And I'm sorry, I'm sitting here looking at my, okay, so I apologize. My privacy system services done.
All right. While you're looking that up, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna say again about if your system, if you're having troubles with your system and it seems like you think it's a problem with the proportioner, let's say, and you feel like, hey, you know what, things aren't coming clean, or I'm losing pressure, or whatever. Sometimes it's not the proportioner; it is actually an air leak. Remember that, like on the 12-volt pumps, they will pump air. They don't pump it very well, but they'll pump it. And then on the booster pumps, they won't pump air at all. Yeah, I mean, Comet pumps and all the others, even like an Udor pump will pump some air. It'll do a suction, it'll do a lift, where the booster pumps won't do that at all. So sometimes if you're having problems with your system, test each individual valve, prime them up fully, let them sit for a few minutes, and then see again. And if they have air in them at that time, you have an air leak in that side of the system. Did you get that, Ray?
Yes.
I'm waiting for you to bring it up.
I'm using a new computer now, and it's just because the old computer went with the business. So I'm on this new dual screen Mac, and it is just an absolute nightmare. But just going back to where we were talking about it, your CRM, your data is so valuable to you whenever you go to sell your business.
Probably the most important thing in your business.
It really is, because you've got to be able to substantiate, hey, I've done, I've done this amount of work and look, and you can say, even if you're not like, for example, we're not in a huge, big, contract area up here in North Florida. It's a spit on the hand, shake on there, and not necessarily the massive contract thing. Oh, give us a contract and do this. Give us this, a contract for X number of years. But whenever you've got something like this, let's see if it's going to let me do it this time, because I've changed my permissions. I'll have to just do that. It's not going to let me share. It's not going to letting me share, and I'm allowing my permissions, and it's just not letting me do that. Like I've done that so many times before. So, oh well. We'll get in here, because I'd love to. Now that this data is not confidential anymore, and I'm actually using a different company, since I'm contractually with Crystal Clean, I can't share any of their data, but I can actually go in here and look at some of our old stuff on Housecall Pro and share that out, and I won't be breaching my confidentiality. So we'll actually let's play with that maybe in the upcoming couple of weeks, and going into like what Housecall Pro could do for you. I'd love to do a Sunday night on that. Mm-hmm. But, whenever you can go in there and show, yes, I've been working for this company now for 10 years doing, as of 4 years ago, we're doing $10,000 a month consistently on these services. No, I don't have a contract, but they're happy with me. They're obviously not going anywhere. Knock on wood. It can help show you to do that. And then, furthermore, combining that, with the emails and constant contact and letting people know, and then auto scheduling on there. I mean, how much nicer would it be if you just call, it sends out an email 30 days before the anniversary of Mrs. Johnson's house washing, going, hey, Ms. Johnson, it's Ray with Spray Wash. Time to do your annual house wash again. Can't wait to see you. Sent you a courtesy estimate on the services we did last time. Click accept on the link below, and we'll get you on the schedule for, 2 months from now.
So just out of curiosity, I have a feeling yours and mine are going to be pretty much the same. I got to take this call, so
yeah.
I'll be right back.
See you. So again, what we're talking about there is, just doing the. I hope it's not an important call, and you realize you can still hear him. But where we're going at is so you can use this information on your CRM to just show the business that you've done, and you can automate your steps as much as possible. Because the front end office, you're spending so much time out there. They're spending so much time on billing, on calling, on scheduling, anything that you can do that will automate your services and automate your systems really is going to be better for you out there.
Have you guys worked that out? If that works for you.
Again, for anybody that joined late, I highly recommend calling Power Wash Store if you're using a ProPortioner.
If you don't hear from him, just leave me on. That's what I was saying.
Grab your check valves, install inline check valves whenever something starts giving you problems. If it's not an air leak, if you think it's a check valve problem, that can save your butt, and you don't have to. You could have 10 of these, in a bleach line. It's not going to hurt anything to have extra ones in there as they fail, but as they fail, just take it out and put another one in. If you start getting a problem and you realize it's not an air leak and it might be a check valve leak, meaning you start smelling bleach in your water or seeing soap in your bleach or soap in your water, guaranteed that's a check valve issue in there. So you can actually install an inline check valve in there, and it'll solve a lot of your problems. Rich asked, how often do we contact them? We would strive for quarterly emails, and I say strive. Sometimes I failed on that. I think one of the most important things you could do, one of the most important things that you can do is to write a newsletter to your customers. Get out there and on in constant contact. If you don't have time to do it, you can subscribe to there's a service out there called Scribd, where you can drag articles offline and use them in your newsletter. Get something that has a decent layout to it, maybe even do it in a PDF format. So not just a blatant advertisement to your customers, but something pertinent to the season. Hey, spring is coming. It's time to do your bedding plants and flowers. This might even be a time, on a newsletter to where you could sell an ad, or even not sell an ad, but go into a relationship with a nursery and say, I had, in Tallahassee, Esposito's is big. So, go to Ralph Esposito and say, Ralph, would you write me an article for my newsletter that's going to go out to 2,500 of my customers? Would you write a letter, article for our newsletter that says, hey, here's how you get your beds in great condition, or is landscape cloth a good idea to use in my flower beds, or just whatever you want to write about, have somebody with a gutter company out there writing about the importance of gutters and getting water away from your foundation. Mm-hmm. You start doing that, and now you're building these relationships that are big just ironclad. I mean, they're sending you business, you're sending them business, and that's how dynasties are made, guys.
Another thing on that, Rich, is if you offer them, this is where I love warranties, and this is where I used my warranty to my advantage. Having a warranty, and for me, it was basically an annual service thing. If you want to maintain your warranty, we have to come back and do this, right? So maintaining that warranty becomes important to them, and that's just another way for them to remember you and doing what Ray was just saying, sending out the newsletters and being able to contact them every now and then giving them a reason to keep contacting you.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. You could hook up with the local Extension 8 office. Mm-hmm. In your area. Guarantee you they would want to put content in your newsletter. Hey, here's getting rid of leaves, compost. Hey, give us an article on composting. I mean, anything, for the fall. I mean, what should you do with yard waste? Is burning a good idea, or can you make a mulch pile, something like that? So,
hey Ray, I was just thinking about what I was going to say before I had that phone call come in, and that was I'm betting that you and I have almost identical contracts, contracts with our large companies. Mm-hmm. And those contracts are contracts that say, you're going to use us for the next 5 years or whatever the case may be. And how many of those contracts do you have in place, or did you have in place? I had 0. Yep. So he had 1, and actually, you just got you're over there.
I just got mine, and it was from Florida State University, right? I mean, and we're a company that's doing anywhere from $800,000 to $1 million a year in washing, and literally that one contract came in last year. Whenever.
Not that we're not putting an importance on contracts. Contracts are important. I'm not saying that they're not, but I'm saying you don't have to be as concerned with contracts, though those will help you in the sale.
They will help you. They will help you. Yeah. But I'll tell you what,
but it's those relationships, I think, that are going to get you that anyhow.
When you go and screw up whenever you go and screw up your job, that contract is worth the paper that it's written on. I mean, you're out. You're gone. And conversely, whenever you keep doing an amazing job for people, they're going to keep using you, over and over and over again.
Right. It is about doing an amazing job. Well, we're over time here, just so you know.
Yes, sir.
And I know you got employee number 7 or number 9.
Employee number 7 is
go back out and do some more working tonight.
Yes, sir. I'm going to get out of the spray wash shirt, put on a crystal clean shirt, and going to town tonight. We got hospital cleaning and a gas station later. So this is fun. This transition period is amazing. And again, I'll say it publicly to you that I appreciate you so much. You picking up so much of the slack in pro and all while I'm.
And look, just to put it out, I don't mean to interrupt you, but to put it out there, even I'm slacking on that. I got some stuff going on that's tying me back and holding me back. So if you need something, do reach out. We will help you out. It's just Ray and I are definitely very busy in what we got going. Didn't mean to interrupt you, but I want to make sure I put that out.
No, absolutely. It might not. We will get back to you. It might take a while, but dear God, we will get back. Jeez. It's craziness, but you know what? Hey, it's cool. And once we get through this transition period, things will be much better and cooler, and I think we'll see a lot of really fun stuff out there. So,
yep. Wash on,
guys. Y'all have a great night. Wild West, thank you, buddy. I appreciate it. Rich and Maria snuck one in. 6 a.m., 5, hitting the lake for 2 hours fishing, and employee number 3 is going to bed soon. I understand.
That's it. I appreciate y'all for watching us. And
yes, sir. We appreciate y'all's time. Y'all have a good night.